So my name is Vitaly, and I've been running Smashing Magazine for a while. Smashing Magazine is one of those resources, magazines which are dedicated to design and web development. And we founded it back in 2006, and my job is basically still to run it. And I'm also an editor-in-chief, so basically every single article that goes on Smashing Magazine's website goes through me. So this is one of my favorite and most time-consuming parts, actually. Well, it's a long story. So when I started back in 1998, building first websites, then with tables and stuff like that, it was really annoying, but at the same time I actually really liked being able to publish something online and put it out there, which was really, really remarkable. And I found it extremely exciting at the time. So I really liked doing that. And then I was freelancing for a while, doing exactly that. I also studied computer science and mathematics, which actually brought me into web, more or less. So I did a lot of back-end stuff first, and then front-end stuff. CSS came along, so I kind of jumped into it with both feet, just because I had a project to work on. So I kind of jumped into it, learned CSS, spent endless nights trying to figure out all this weird browser bugs and stuff like that. And in the end, this is what has become my passion. I found myself more and more often doing web stuff. Just because I guess just because I got really excited about what we could do on the web by making what we know and what I personally knew at the time available to everybody out there. That was really exciting at the time. And it is still, actually. This is why probably I still do it. I still do that. So it started in 2006, and I was freelancing at the time, and I couldn't find any resource which would collect all the useful CSS techniques, tools and stuff like that, which would actually make my life easier as a designer and developer. So as I was freelancing, I had to search for tools all the time, and that was kind of annoying. So I needed to find this one nice, wonderful place. So because there was none, I decided why not create one. And so we did that, and we published a few articles, and we found out that there is a big interest in the community, that people actually were coming. And mostly when we started out, it was just a list of tools, a list of techniques, pretty basic and cheap content, if you like. But then over time, it was really important to us to move towards editorial work, like really professional editorial work. So we hoped, at least, that we had managed to become an online publication, a trustworthy, worthy publication with good, reputation. And for me, right now, it's really, really important to put out the content that is available and useful for the community out there, and which is of a good quality, the best you can get. Yeah, we are not small, we're not big. Most people think that we are huge, and we are located somewhere on the shores of Santa Monica in the US. This is not like that at all. We are very small. We have 10 people, me included, and we are located in Freiburg, Germany, which is actually in the southern part of Germany, very close to Switzerland. It's very sunny and very beautiful. It's very small too. But it is very nice, and most of the people working there in the company are very, well, they have very different skills, and most of them actually have different skills kind of combined, which is really amazing. So most people can do extremely different things. So we have Marcus, for example, who is doing print stuff, but at the same time he's taking care of finances, and he's also kind of involved into the event, Smashing Conf events, stuff like that. Me, I'm doing a lot of editing, but at the same time I run workshops and in-house workshops and consulting. And I also do take care of our events, and I also edit our books, and it's all mixed. So sometimes it's just crazy and very interesting, because you get very different people kind of coming together from very different perspectives, putting stuff together and creating this wonderful thing that we have with Smashing. So it was really important for me to not get any, to not lose my independence. So we never had an angel investor or whatever, something like that. When we started out, it was just our spare time, which we needed to invest. We just ran the hosting, and it was pretty much it. We just started publishing. So we didn't have any financial support at all. It was, I must admit, I think, a bit of luck that we actually managed to launch the site when there was no resource like that at the time. So it kind of really helped to boost our traffic and to boost us as a brand as well. And we did get some offers about people willing to invest or doing lots of conferences, like 50 conferences or 50 books or whatever. But it is really important for me to be able to say no to things and be able to stand behind decisions made. So I do have my own values and principles, and I stand behind them. And for me, it's really not about the money, but actually about being able to change things or actually make a difference, even if it's a small one. So which is why I really do not, personally, I really don't understand startups really trying very hard to get funding, because I think if you have a good idea and you implement it well, you might end up with a really good result, which will be noticed, and users will notice, and they will respect that. So I don't want to get any investors in Smashing. Right, it took a while. So first of all, in the beginning, it was really difficult because you basically just try your best, but at some point, because we're just two in the beginning, at some point when you find yourself in a situation when you have to edit an article, but you are not really proficient, or you don't know a lot about the topic, it's getting really hard. So I'm not an expert in security, for example. So if I were to edit a security article, it would be really hard for me because I just can't do that. I really don't know, right? So I can't provide meaningful feedback to the author. So this is why we introduced the so-called experts panel, which is a panel of around 120, 130 people worldwide, who just committed to providing feedback to our articles before they get published. Which means when we have an article coming up and we don't have the expertise in-house, we send an article to those experts. Not to all of them, obviously, just a few of them, according to the topic that they actually are well, associated with. And then they send back a questionnaire or form with some feedback, which we then send to the author. And this has been really helpful. And we always send at least an article to at least 2 reviewers or experts, and then we collect feedback. And in order for the article to get published, it needs to get at least 3.7 stars. So, and every reviewer can assess article from 1 to 5 stars. So 3.7 on average is like, yeah, but at the same time, if the article gets rejected, we still pay the author the money. Not full amount, probably. It depends on how much time he or she has invested into it. But it really helps to differentiate or kind of find what is really, really good and what is not so good, maybe. But if the author is willing to actually edit the article and work on it and spend a lot of time on it, then it gets to that level when it can be published at some point. I wish I knew. I have no idea. It looks like right now we have a lot of conversations about performance and also offline experience, which is something that hasn't been discussed heavily over the last few years. Now we kind of managed to get really good at front end, CSS, JavaScript and stuff like that, like how we architect our style sheets, or how do we architect our front end in general. Now, of course, with JavaScript being on the back end as well, it's getting really exciting because we can actually share the code both on the server side, on the server and on the client. Now, there is a lot of potential there to make really interesting, really responsive websites and applications. So this is really exciting. But I'm personally more excited about performance and offline experience, just because we have a lot of work to do there. I don't have a permanent home and I find myself traveling all the time, so I'm kind of one of those digital nomads. And I find myself a lot in situations where I can't access websites full stop. Everything is way too slow, extremely slow. So for me it's becoming really, really important to be able to edit our articles or to read articles or to reply to emails and sync Dropbox or whatever, even if I have a really slow connection. So with Dropbox it's obviously difficult, but I really do want to be able to access websites. So I think that performance at the moment is really not solved by far. I mean, we have to do a lot of work to get there, and we will. And the same goes for offline experience, because this is also something that we haven't considered yet, because you will find yourself in many cases being offline and you need to deal with it somehow. So I'm really excited about that. I'm not sure if it's going to be a trend or not, but now I wish I knew that too.
Yeah.
I think we are very mature now. It's just if you compare conversations we had 5 years ago with those we have now, it's a very different level. Although sometimes we do tend to circle around the same topics, like progressive enhancement, it kind of pops up all the time. People start questioning progressive enhancement and then starting actually agreeing that the progressive enhancement is important, and it's kind of we're circling back and forth sometimes. But I think we are really at a point where it has become extremely diverse and versatile. It is just impossible to have a good understanding of pretty much everything what's going on. So sometimes you need to specialize. There is just no way around. At the same time, I think it will be extremely important to kind of keep this global overview of what's going on, just to be able to make just the right decisions at just the right time, given circumstances or requirements that the project has. So this is going to be very important. So actually keeping in mind everything what's going on is going to be very hard, but also something that people will have to keep in mind, I think. I think that responsive design is still called responsive design today, but I think at some point we will just drop responsive word and everything will be pretty much responsive. I'm not talking about this year or next year, but probably in 5 years, 6 years, it's going to be the easiest solution for cross-browser experiences in general, just because you don't have to consider all the different platforms and it will kind of more or less work across all the different devices. But when it comes to responsive design itself, again, performance is a big deal. There are many bloated responsive websites out there, which are taking way too much time to load and which do require a lot of resources and bandwidth that are not really necessarily required in order to access the site. So we have to get that fixed. But also at the same time, there are many interesting design patterns, like how do you deal with tables, how do you deal with complex graphs or charts, or all those components are being, well, we're kind of looking and finding nice solutions for all those problems now. So at some point we will have more or less established patterns which can be reused and which will make the experience for users more predictable. But also actually moving from one device to another is also something that we have to keep in mind when it comes to responsive design. So sometimes you might want to start your online experience, shopping experience on your phone and then just continue on your desktop. And there is no really proper way of doing that yet. And Cameron Moll is talking a lot about cohesive UX, which is where he's mentioning exactly that point, like transitioning from one device to another should be more seamless. It's not just about adjusting layout, but actually really adjusting the experience so it feels more natural to move between those devices. This is something we have to kind of discover and understand better. I guess this is also the area that we will have to look into more closely over the next few years. So I think, so I'm doing a lot of in-house workshops, and I'm very lucky to be able to get insights in big companies and small companies on how they approach exactly those cross-browser experience, but also multi-device experiences. And what I find really appearing all the time as a pattern almost is that when you start with content, whatever way it is, it could be mobile first when you actually try to put the content in those boxes on a small screen, or if you start maybe tablet first or desktop first, but actually still think about content and try to define what core functionality means, or what core content means, what is really important for your users. It is a good way to start, because then you can actually go ahead and move to all the other diverge to all the different directions, be it like a small experience, like mobile experience, tablet experience, desktop experience, and so on. But because you have a very clear understanding of what is core content and core functionality, it is a very nice foundation to build upon. And then you can actually make sure that when you start building, maybe you start mobile first. I know some designers who start with something tablet or desktop first, just because they need to see a big picture. They need to see kind of where the design is heading visually, and they can't see it on a small mobile screen. But that's fine, that's perfectly fine if you actually start with content first. So you start with content, and then you look more closely into components that you will need on the site, like your stuff information architecture, you see what you need. Then you kind of try and incorporate visual design. And then I wouldn't argue for Photoshop, and I'm not a big fan of Photoshop, but you would maybe use something like an element collage where you actually combine all those different components, and this is how a page emerges over time. So you start with something very small that is going to be used everywhere, and then you keep combining stuff until it works. And again, Brett Frost is speaking about atomic design, and we have this notion of design systems coming up as well. But everybody's talking about creating and crafting systems that are scalable and flexible. So everybody's trying to do that, and I guess that this is also the way that we are going to approach responsive projects and cross device experiences as well. It's just a really easy, not easy, but it's a really nice and systematic way of breaking down a complex problem into smaller parts and manage and deal with them. I wish I knew that. I guess personally I would love to, well, I will definitely dive more into what's going on in the JavaScript world with ES6 and promises and all this crazy fancy stuff. Server-side JavaScript, this is something I have to learn personally. I don't have a lot of experience there, but also service workers, offline experiences, all of this stuff that is actually already available today has to be learned, unfortunately, or fortunately. So it will take quite some time. So I'm looking forward to that. Except beyond that, I'm just really curious about what responsive design will bring in terms of patterns and in terms of off-the-shelf components and solutions. I kind of really like going to Chinese or Japanese websites just to see what they are like. And it's been remarkable to see a huge number of Japanese websites, responsive Japanese websites appearing over the last year. And surprisingly, they are sometimes very different, but sometimes very similar to what we are doing here in Europe. So it's been just crazy just to see how all those culture, all those different patterns, and all those different languages as well, still work within this responsive environment and how it works. So I'm looking forward to that. Right, so right now we are working on a new book, Smashing Book 5, which is going to be released, well, we're probably going to finish it at latest in 2 months, so we'll see how it goes. We do have a couple of conferences coming up as well. What else? Workshops. Well, we have a few special projects as well coming up, but I can't tell you just yet because it's not officially confirmed. But this is going to be quite a smashing year.